Have you ever heard of a king being torn apart by trees? Not killed in a glorious battle, not poisoned by a rival, but literally ripped in two by the very people he tried to exploit. This is the gruesome, almost unbelievable story of Prince Igor of Kyiv, a Viking ruler whose greed led to one of the most brutal deaths in medieval history. But his horrific end wasn't the final chapter. It was the spark that ignited a firestorm of vengeance, led by his wife, a woman who would become a saint, but not before she became a terrifying angel of death. This is a tale of hubris, horrifying revenge, and the bloody birth of a legend. Igor of Kyiv, the name might not be as famous as Ragnar Lothbrok or William the Conqueror, but his legacy is just as soaked in blood and ambition. He was a Varangian, a Viking, part of the Rus people who sailed down the rivers of Eastern Europe, carving out kingdoms from the vast, untamed lands. He inherited the throne of Kyiv from his predecessor Olga, a man who had united the tribes and established Kyiv as the heart of a burgeoning empire. Igor's job was to hold it all together and, more importantly, to make it rich. And the primary source of wealth? Tribute. Imagine being a farmer or a craftsman in one of the many Slavic tribes like the Drevlians. Twice a year, the prince and his heavily armed retinue, the Druzhina, would show up at your doorstep. This wasn't a friendly tax collection. It was an extortion racket on a grand scale. They'd demand furs, honey, wax, and whatever other valuables you had. Refusal wasn't an option. The Druzhina were professional warriors, and the Drevlians, though fierce, were no match for the organized might of the Kievan Rus. They paid, they grumbled, they cursed the prince under their breath, but they paid. For years, this was the system, an unequal but stable relationship. Igor collected his tribute, and the Drevlians survived. But in the year 945, something in Igor snapped. Maybe it was greed. Maybe his warriors were grumbling, demanding a bigger share of the spoils. We don't know for sure. What we do know is that after collecting the usual tribute from the Drevlians, Igor made a fatal decision. As he and his main force were heading back to Kyiv, he looked at the carts piled high with furs and honey and thought, "It's not enough." He turned to his men and announced he was going back. He sent the bulk of his army and the collected tribute ahead to Kyiv, and with only a small band of guards, he turned his horse back towards Iskaristan, the Drevlian capital. He was going to demand a second tribute. A double dip. This was an unprecedented act of avarice. The Drevlians had already paid their due. To them, this wasn't just about money or goods anymore. It was about honor. It was a profound insult. When news reached the Drevlian Prince Mal that Igor was returning for more, he reportedly said, "If a wolf comes to the sheep, he will take away the whole flock one by one, unless he is killed." The Drevlians decided the wolf had to be killed. When Igor and his small retinue arrived, they were not met with fearful villagers. They were met with an army. The Drevlians surrounded the prince and his men, overwhelming them easily. But they weren't satisfied with a quick death for Igor. They wanted to make a statement. A terrifying, unforgettable statement. They took the Prince of Kyiv to a clearing in the forest. There, they bent two young, strong birch trees down to the ground and tied each of Igor's legs to the top of a different tree. Then they let the trees go. The trees snapped back to their upright positions, and Prince Igor was torn in half. It was a death of unimaginable agony, a punishment designed to mirror his own greed that was tearing their tribe apart. Back in Kyiv, Igor's wife, Olga, waited for her husband's return. But instead of Igor, a Drevlian delegation arrived. They were bold, arrogant even. They had killed the Kyivan prince, and now they had a proposition for his widow. Their Prince Mal, they announced, wanted to marry her. This was a classic power move. By marrying Igor's widow, Mal would legitimize his claim over Kyiv and unite the two peoples under his rule. They probably expected Olga, a woman now without a husband or protector, to be scared, to see this as her only option for survival. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Olga listened to their proposal. Her face, a mask of grief, betrayed nothing of the cold fury brewing within. She told the Drevlian envoys, "Your proposal is pleasing to me. Indeed, my husband cannot rise from the dead. But I desire to honor you tomorrow in the presence of my people. Go now to your boat, and when my people come for you, say that you will not ride on horses or walk, but that they should carry you in your boat." The Drevlians were flattered. To be carried in their own boat through the capital city? This was the highest honor. They agreed and went back to their camp, celebrating their diplomatic genius. The next morning, Olga's soldiers arrived at the Drevlian camp. As instructed, the envoys proudly refused to walk and demanded to be carried in their boat. The Kyivans obliged. They lifted the boat with the 20 smug Drevlians inside and carried it through the city. But they didn't take them to the palace. They carried them to a deep trench that Olga had ordered dug the night before. And without a word, they tipped the boat over, dumping the envoys into the pit. As the Drevlians scrambled in confusion, Olga appeared at the edge of the trench and asked them if they found the honor to their liking. Then she gave the order. Her soldiers began burying them alive. But she was just getting started. She sent a message to the Drevlians saying she accepted their proposal but required their most distinguished men to accompany her back to their capital for the wedding. The Drevlians, unaware of the fate of their first delegation, were overjoyed. They gathered their best governors, merchants, and nobles and sent them to Kyiv. When this new, high-ranking delegation arrived, Olga greeted them warmly and invited them to refresh themselves in the bathhouse after their long journey. The Drevlian nobles, eager to wash off the road dust, happily entered. Once they were all inside, Olga's men barred the doors from the outside and set the building on fire. Every single one of them burned to death. Olga's vengeance still wasn't satisfied. She then sent a third message to the Drevlians. This time she told them, "I am now coming to you. So prepare great quantities of mead in the city where you killed my husband, that I may weep over his grave and hold a funeral feast for him." The Drevlians, somehow still oblivious and perhaps believing her actions were just some bizarre pre-wedding ritual, did as she asked. Olga arrived with a small group of followers at Igor's makeshift grave near Iskorosten. She wept and held a funeral feast. She encouraged the Drevlians to drink, and they did, celebrating what they thought was the end of the conflict and their union with Kyiv. When they were drunk and incapacitated, Olga gave a signal. Her followers drew their hidden swords and fell upon the Drevlians. According to the chronicles, they massacred 5,000 of them that night. The final act of her revenge was the siege of their capital, Iskorosten. For a year the city held out. The remaining Drevlians fought desperately. Seeing the stalemate, Olga resorted to cunning once more. She sent a message to the city, offering peace. She said her revenge was complete. Her only demand for tribute was a seemingly small and bizarre one, 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house. The exhausted Drevlians, desperate for an end to the siege, eagerly complied. They gathered the birds and sent them to Olga. That night, Olga instructed her soldiers to tie a piece of cloth with sulfur to the leg of each bird. At dusk, they lit the claws and released the birds. The pigeons and sparrows, as birds do, flew back to their nests in the eaves, coops, and thatched roofs of the wooden city. In an instant, the entire city of Iskorosten was ablaze. There was nowhere to run. Those who fled the flames were cut down by Olga's soldiers waiting outside the walls. The city was burned to the ground. The survivors were either killed or sold into slavery. Olga's revenge was finally, brutally, complete. With her enemies utterly destroyed, Olga ruled as regent for her young son, Sviatoslav. She proved to be as shrewd a ruler as she was a vengeful one. She reformed the tribute system, establishing administrative centers and setting clear, fixed amounts to prevent the kind of greed that got her husband killed. She laid the administrative foundations of the Kyivan Rus. Later in her life, she converted to Orthodox Christianity, becoming the first ruler of the Rus to do so, and was eventually canonized as a saint. Saint Olga of Kyiv is a strange title for a woman who buried people alive and burned a city to the ground using birds. But her story is a powerful reminder of how medieval politics worked. It was a world of brutal actions and profound consequences. Igor's death was a catalyst. His greed set in motion a chain of events that not only led to the decimation of an entire tribe, but also paved the way for the rise of one of the most formidable women in early European history. His story serves as a dark lesson in overreach, while Olga's serves as a terrifying testament to the fury of a woman scorned, a queen who built a nation on the ashes of her enemies. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into the bloody history of the Kievan Rus fascinating, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the forgotten corners of history. Let me know in the comments what you think of Olga's methods. Was it justified revenge or a monstrous overreaction? See you next time.